There are no petitions. Public input. We have a number of public input items today. We have one decline request based on time and relevance to this agenda. So Richard Hursthouse from Forest and Bird on tree protection. I've spoken to Mr. Hursthouse in face-to-face the other day, and I'm going to meet with him to discuss this further. Our accepted requests in this order are the Sustainable Business Council, Kate Ferguson, Kane Titchener on water fluoridation, Dr. Matthew Jones from the New Zealand Institute of Landscape Architects, Hannah Blackmore, the Weed Management Advisory, Sarah Smuts-Kennedy from For the Love of Bees, Dr. Muriel Watts for Weed Management will be Skyping in, and Andrew Brown from Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei. So that is a warning to everyone that we are supposed to have half an hour for public forum, but we will do our best to keep close to that window. I assume we will go over that window, but just a pleading from me that we keep it tight, ask questions, don't give comment. We want to get questions so the people presenting to us can comment instead. So I don't have to accept those at this stage. So the first public input item is Kate Ferguson from the Sustainable Business Council. Thank you very much. And if you just press the button in front of you there so we can hear you. Thank you very much. Okay.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Kate Ferguson, toku and goa. It's a privilege to be here today. Thank you for having me. I manage the climate programme for the Sustainable Business Council. We are a division of Business New Zealand. We represent over 100 businesses, collectively about 28% of private sector GDP, and the employers of 160,000 full-time equivalents. Climate change is their top sustainability priority, and it's my role to help them deliver on the ambitious targets that they've set, but also work together to go further, faster, to progress New Zealand's transition to a low-emissions economy. 13 of our CEOs collectively established the Climate Leaders Coalition, which was launched in July 2018. That has much more representation from business. It's an issue that they were really drawn towards working together on, and it's fair to say that their role has been quite high profile, particularly around bringing about the Zero Carbon Act and the establishment of the Climate Change Commission. Recently, we've developed a briefing to the incoming government that captures 26 recommendations around climate action priorities. We were asked by several of the political parties to put forward a consensus view. So we understand that having a collective view from business around opportunities to progress climate change that are important was really valuable to them. So we were happy to play that role. And it's really heartening to see that several of our common areas of interest are what's been highlighted in Tarakia Taupiri, Auckland's climate plan, and specifically accelerating transformation across the light and heavy transport fleets, and also scaling up the uptake of energy and process heat efficiency and encouraging switching to renewable fuel sources for things like boilers. Our document kind of outlines the supporting frameworks and policy settings that central government could consider to further those actions, and it's kind of important to note that local government can play a role in supporting some of that stuff too. And I think for me, from a transport perspective, things like low carbon transport zones send a really clear signal to freight movers around the future of the city and how we see it going, and all of those levers are important signals to encourage businesses to change their behaviour. Congratulations on signing up to really ambitious emissions targets. You're in a really similar position to a lot of our businesses, which is they're under scrutiny now to deliver. We don't have a huge amount of time left to get meaningful emission reduction activity underway. And that's not to mention some of the adaptation considerations that we'll need to be actioning fairly soon, particularly in areas like the Hauraki Gulf. So for us, it's about the way of working as much as what's being worked on. So we're really clear that our role is to help businesses work together, to share knowledge, but more importantly, to collaborate around initiatives. And we want to extend that focus to working with central and local government around looking at what some of the initiatives, plans, and supporting frameworks could look like. And yeah, I'm happy to take any questions around our work or what that could involve.
Deputy Chair, Peppercorn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tēnā koe, Kate. Thank you for coming along to present today and just to get an update. Is there anything you actually would like to request of Council, or are you here purely for an update, which is just lovely as well?
I guess my request would be just, you know, you have outlined some ambitious targets. It's great to see. It's very heartening. There are businesses who are, you know, in the same position as you. Just progress with what you've outlined, and don't be, you know, reach out if you think there's things that you need from the business community.
Councillor Walker.
Just got a question. Given that the council informs itself based on advice from various quarters, and that includes the International Panel on Climate Change, in a situation where there is real-world data that is more current around temperature, around storm events, around methane emissions, around dramatic ice melt, do you think that council should be assessing risk much more currently in order to inform our position?
Absolutely, businesses are. So there's been a huge movement in the last 18 months around using the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure to help businesses not only understand the risks, but value what that might mean. I mean, climate change is impacting businesses now, right? There are a whole load of businesses in Napier over the last couple of days who've just lost a lot of money. So I think what's very front of mind for businesses is having a much broader understanding of flooding, drought, sea level rise, increase in storms, starting to project what the impact could be around their distribution, the areas that they operate, and just starting to build in a bit of a plan for how they might deal with those risks. A really interesting example has been COVID-19. So we had a lot of businesses who'd already started factoring in a carbon price in their profit and loss statements in anticipation of the ETS ramping up and having to make more payments for carbon. And those businesses found themselves in a really fortunate position post-COVID because they had a bit of a financial buffer. And I think the ability to understand climate change risk will position those businesses much better. So absolutely, it's a strongly emerging tool that will be very helpful.
Thank you very much. Member Wilson, you have a question?
Kia ora, Kate. I just really briefly, I know we're all strapped for time at the moment, but I was interested in terms of the briefing that was undertaken to the incoming government. What one thing do you believe struck resonance with, if you can even tell sometimes when you're presenting? So what do you believe of all of those priorities that you put before them had resonance?
Transport. Without a shadow of a doubt, transport. So we knew from a Labour perspective that they were really interested in the domestic freight sector as a key opportunity area. From National's perspective, it was around electric vehicles, and the Greens was kind of looking at more of that integrated intermodal approach and how we think more about transport as a system, which is probably more consistent with the business, how businesses think about it, because they have corporate fleets as well as moving freight around. So I think when you look at New Zealand Inc.'s emissions profile, transport is the area that we need to focus on if we're serious about bringing our trajectory down because it is the area where we do have a lot of solutions already openly available to us that we need to start taking up and scaling.
Councillor Henderson, last question.
Thanks, Chair. So the government has just announced, as you may know, a $70 million fund to help business switch from fossil fuels to clean energy. Do you think this is going to get good take-up in the business community?
I anticipate it will, yeah. And I think what's been really heartening about that programme is how quickly it's come about. So the fact that it's going live, it's gone live, and they'll make the decisions around who gets the funding in January or February, I believe. I think that's exactly the type of role that central government can play to unlock capital, because at the moment it is still more expensive to make those decisions.
Thank you. And just one last question for me. I guess I get a lot of, not pushback, but questions around if we are trying to push business. But your members are everyone from banks to Downer to Fletcher to Fisher and Paykel to Fonterra to Sanford, like every major, even petrol station, Sky City. So I guess you're how can you elevate your voice as all those businesses? Because I think a lot of the time people perceive government or council as pushing business in the wrong way when you're all far ahead of us in a climate perspective.
It's a really interesting context at the moment, because I think my sense is that we're moving away from a need to push each other and almost moving to a sense of we're seeing signals from all sectors now. So the business community, we were intentional with the Climate Leaders Coalition because we knew we needed some profile 2 years ago. But what we're seeing from media, so Stuff have taken away their comments platform for climate change deniers. We have the school strikers representing youth and coming out in, what was it, 170,000 of them last year. We have Generation Zero, who've always been really vocal, and we're seeing great things coming out of local government too. And central government has been really clear about, this is the term of delivery around climate change. So I think it's less of a question of who do we need to push to lead. It's more just a normalisation piece around getting in behind what's been laid out in the Climate Change Act and working together to deliver some ambitious plans and initiatives.
Thank you very much. Awesome to hear from you today. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank
And
you
thanks
for
to all
having me.
your members too. Cool. Thank you. Do we
Thanks.
need to? Could I have a mover for that, please? Councillor Coombe and seconder, Councillor Collins. All those in favour? Those against? Perfect. Next up we have, Kane Titchener to talk about fluoride. Hi, Kane. Cool. Welcome. If you just want to hit your microphone there and maybe bring it a little bit
I'll
closer.
have to do that, apologies. I'm just here to briefly discuss the new NTP, which is a National Toxicology Program draft report on fluoride's neurotoxicity. Just a quick update for those who don't know, I spoke in 2015 and stopped a move to fluoridate Onehonga. And I've also reduced the fluoride levels to 0.7 parts per million based on the latest research. 2016 I presented a petition to stop the expansion of fluoridation in Auckland. Who is the National Toxicology Program? They're an interagency program whose mission is to coordinate, conduct and communicate toxicological research in the US. They're effectively the equivalent of the Ministry of Health in New Zealand. On the 16th of September 2020, the NTP released a systematic review of all published studies. Excuse me. There's the research there. They came to the conclusion that fluoride is presumed to be a cognitive neurodevelopmental hazard to humans. It's presumed because it's the highest level of confidence rating possible, because humans cannot be experimented on. When considering all the evidence, including studies with exposures to fluoride levels higher than 1.5 milligrams per litre in water, the NTP concludes that fluoride is presumed to be a cognitive neurodevelopmental hazard to humans. This is the single most important thing I'd like you to see today. The EPA use a factor of 10 when identifying what the safe level of a neurotoxicant is or should be. So at 1.5 parts per million, which is what the NTP draft report has identified, The safe level for everyone in the population, the maximum, is 0.15 parts per million. So based on that, the fluoride level at 0.7 in Auckland is 5 times over that maximum level. Just to add weight to this, on the 7th of October, Linda Birnbaum, who is a retired NTP director, wrote a op-ed about this, saying that it is time to protect kids' developing brains from fluoride. You've got the link there, and it should be in front of you as well. Within this NTP study, there are a number of major studies since I spoke to you in 2016 pointing out that fluoride is a major concern. I'd like to briefly discuss Green 2019. All of these are government-funded National Institutes of Health researched papers, peer-reviewed. This Green et al. Was covered in the JAMA Pediatrics paper in the journal, and it's the association between maternal fluoride exposure during pregnancy and IQ scores in offspring. What the editors came back with was the editors expressed how very concerning and startling the evidence against fluoride is, and how the neurological damage is on par with lead. Lead reduced IQ, as you remember, between 3 and 5 IQ points over the population. In an interview between the two editors, I just want to paraphrase this quickly, just asking what would they be advising the mothers to do. I think I would advise them to drink bottled water or filtered water, because it's not a particularly odious thing to do and potentially does reduce the risk. You know, the other thing is that some people may not be able to afford bottled water. It could be financial burden to some low-income families. We need to think about that as well. The problem we've got in New Zealand with that is just warning people isn't enough, because fluoride is actually a compulsory medication per the Supreme Court. So I've got 2 requests for council today, and that is implement an immediate moratorium on fluoridation, and secondly, urgently request an investigation into safety of fluoridation for all of the population, including these risk subset groups, including pregnant mothers, kidney impaired people, infants, and high volume water drinkers. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you very much, Kane. Thank you. Thank you very much. Do I have any questions? Councillor Walker.
So I've just got a question around point 2 there that goes to risk. And my question is, do you consider that Auckland Council, and effectively the council-controlled organisation that is supplying the water, which is Watercare, is exposing parts of the population, especially pregnant women, babies and infants, to a high level of risk through exposure to fluoride, against a background where there may not be adequate warning on the part of either Auckland Council and or Watercare?
Yes, there's obviously a massive risk with this as a result of this new research. I think it should be taken into account urgently.
Okay, thanks.
Urgently.
Are there any other questions, members? No? Thank you very much for that presentation, Kane.
Thank you.
Cool. Do I have a mover?
Thank you.
Cool. Councillor Sayers, Councillor Walker, second. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? No. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Dr. Matthew Jones from the New Zealand Institute of Landscape Architects. Cool.